And now I'm delighted to bring to the stage Benoît-Etienne Domenget, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Sommet Education, to moderate the panel on tapping into the millennial mindset. Benoît, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So we have a couple of challenges. The first one is that we are running late, if I've got everything okay. And we've got 30 minutes to discuss about a topic that would probably take us the rest of the day, given the quality of the panelists. It's my privilege to introduce the panelists that we have here today. First of all, Meliá, Global Development Director for Meliá Hotels and Resorts. Olivier, CEO of Emaar Hospitality. Michael, owner of Tungsten Partners. And Amar, CEO and Managing Partner of the Standard Hotel International. Round of applause for them before we start, as always. Thank you for them. So tapping into the millennial mindset, and quick introduction to be sure that we know who we are talking about. 3 figures to give you on that. First of all, those millennials, they are a lot. Born 1985 for the millennial, 1995 for the Gen Z. We are talking about billion people, 1.8 billion. So let us not underestimate how those guys are going to reshape the industry. Second, in the US, you're probably familiar with that, but in 2019, there will be more millennial than baby boomers. And baby boomers are the founders of the paradigm of the new hotel industry as we all know it today with the chain hotels. 50% of the users of Airbnb are actually millennials. Only those 3 figures. And a bit of background on who they are and what the way they think. There's a famous pediatrician from Harvard, Dr. Michael Rich, who made a study on the Gen Z and who really they are. Obviously, they are digital natives, and that has a real consequence. Their brain is actually rewarding much more their ability to switch from one topic to another rather than to stay focused. Meaning that for you, for us, hoteliers, that has a consequence. But which one, we'll see. They are multitaskers. That's the immediate consequence. We call them the slashers, as you may know. They do A/B/C all at the same time. You probably have kids in that room which are, acting and behaving like that. They love personalization, which again is a shift of paradigm versus the all good model that we know about the hotel chain, with all due respect for all of you guys. And last but not least, they are pretty low, if not poor, on everything which is soft skills related, even though they want personalization, which is an interesting stretch. So are we ready? Are you ready for those type of new generation? We'll see that in a moment. Your paradigm, our old paradigm, 50, 60 years ago, the hotel industry was at the forefront of the innovation, mainly product-driven. It seems now that the hospitality is, is struggling with coping with the pace of change in this industry. So I'm going to turn first on Amar, and to, as CEO of Standard, you've been pioneering this new movement. Do you think this approach and your approach is still relevant? Because with all due respect, it nearly seems now that you are establishment. You're an established brand. You were very disruptive a couple of years ago. How do you cope with that change?
I think we're still relevant, but we need to get better and better at what we do. And I think this shift that you're talking about, in particular, alternative accommodations and Airbnb, is something we have to take very seriously. I think for several years, most hotel company CEOs said, it's not a threat, it's a different product. Our customers are not users. I think for the next generation, what we have to be careful of is that the millennials' default is to use an Airbnb. Our default is to use a hotel. So to assume that it's the same is a mistake. When the millennial generation is the one with the spending power, that's going to be an issue that we have to deal with. But I'll tell you, one thing we can do as hoteliers that Airbnb can never do is actually bring people together. They have a distributed model by nature, and the idea of bringing people together in forums like this, socializing, communing, eating, drinking together, that's something that is very special that only we can do. I liken it a little bit to even 15 years ago when the internet started happening in a big, big way. People thought cities were dead because everybody could telecommunicate. The reality is cities became very much stronger. So I think about it the same way with Airbnb, the distributed model. We have to take advantage of our core strength, which is bringing people together, and that's what Standard's always done.
You're familiar with the concept global nomadism. You know, those new travelers who have passion for new discoveries, experiences, work-life balance, somehow independent. And I'm interested in knowing, Maria, you know, from your standpoint, again at Meliá, you represent the establishment, the chain hotel brands, and you've recently introduced a new brand, Inside. When you go on the website, and you'll probably be familiar with it, it looks pretty fun, pretty shiny. Don't you think that your kind of concept is still too rigid for those kind of new consumers?
Well, what we believe is that certainly the moment of coffee for everyone is finished. Now there is a lot of generations mixing together. It's not just millennials, but it's the Gen Z, the Gen Y, and certain generations that are looking different things. So we have, as hoteliers, to put our brands and our portfolio in a code that's not just of a demographic approach, but a psychographic approach. And if we talk about millennials, they really want experience, a different experience. And because of that, it's important to have a different type of approach on the branding. Technology is not a trend. It's not something that make you special. It's something that is for granted for a millennial. So you have to have brands linked to that experience. And linked to all of that, we have created certain brands in our portfolio that very much link to the psychographic. One of them is Insight, as you were mentioning. It's very millennial driven. And this brand is not really rigid. It's a brand that is trying to bring this new expertise of the millennial that want to have a differentiation experience. They want to be cultural connected with a certain location. So our hotels are really open to the region or the place where they are placed. And they try to embrace and potentialize the relationship between people. So what we're trying is to be very innovative. We have been trying in our company, and we have been facing a huge cultural transformation, not just on the branding, but as us, as a company, in order to understand that nowadays it's important to be agile and to adapt people on trying to bring them a differentiation very much linked to the experience. And Inside is one example.
Olivier, Rove Hotels, and Maria just told us about, cultural shift. When you go on your website, tone of voice, super cool. Photos, hyper cool. Lots of hashtags everywhere. Experiences. Are you trying to keep up with the pace? Do you think you're really innovative, and how that will or is already influencing the way you operate those properties?
Well, we're trying to appeal to the millennials and the millennial mindset. We focus on millennials, on this age group, but the millennial mindset and attributes that are linked to the millennial mindset overlap into other generations, right? The look for authenticity, for local relevance, etc. You don't have to be a millennial to appreciate that. Rove Hotels, for us, solves one part of the equation. It's about hosting people, travelers that are millennials or that have the millennial mindset. And for that, we do exactly what you say. We speak their language. We publish images that appeal to them. And then, very importantly, we follow through with an experience that is commensurate, right? So it's a whole story. It's a whole guest cycle which has to be appealing to this mindset. The other part of the equation, the other challenge that we face is that we're also employing millennials more and more. And there it's a different concept. It's us checking into their lives, right? Almost them employing us as their employer for part of their life. And that is quite a challenge because naturally in organizations, people who are higher up the hierarchy are older, right? I'm not a millennial. I'm not even close to a millennial. So how do we deal with this challenge in order not to fall into the trap? I don't know if you remember 20 years ago when the hotel business was trying to develop floors for women, right? And you had a bunch of 50-year-old men sitting around the table trying to decide what women need, and then crazy things like pink armchairs came out, right? So we don't want to make the same mistake with millennials. What we've done, we've introduced or we've included a group of millennials into our organization called the E25. They are below 25, super bright, super smart, and they think and act like millennials. They're not integrated into the hierarchy or the organization. They're really free floaters within Emaar Hospitality. They manage projects. They attend all the meetings. I had to educate my team, my corporate directors, that these are not some weirdos. They are E25. They are millennials. They ask questions which don't come into our mind. But they are super helpful because they help us think and understand that generation. And this is how a language that you see on the Rove website comes out, because I could not invent it. I'm too old for that, or my mindset is too different from that. So it's really important to get within the organization this influence, but also to adapt the organization so that they can be productive and they can live their strengths within it. And it's not easy.
Thank you for that. I'm conscious that, in the room, there are investors, people who are spending money, and you probably want to hear a bit about business models, return on investment, development opportunities. We'll go into that, but in a slightly different way. And let us investigate those business models according to branding, distribution, investment, CapEx. And I'm going to start, we've said, and it appears from everything you've said, that those brands are really strong because they are powerful on the soft element, the service, the intangible. It seems from the outside that the business model is pretty healthy. Very strong on the intangible, maybe a bit lower capital intensive on the real estate development, those kind of things. But the first thing is about branding. If you look at the brands which are now creating the buzz locally, you will find some names that probably none of us around the table is or was aware a couple of weeks, months ago. Ovolo Hotels, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with. I really encourage you to look at their website and to see what they are doing. Those brands are pretty no brand. Are brand dead? Michael, we've had an interesting discussion yesterday about that. What about branding? What about global branding? What's your perspective on that?
Benoit's such a provocateur. He always throws in sort of the direct questions. Are brands dead? I wouldn't say that that's such a direct statement, but Tungsten Partners sees the landscape changing, obviously very dramatically, as do you all. At the risk of oversimplifying the story of how I see the hotel landscape, I guess I see like this sort of post-war expansion of massive brands based on kind of an American sort of expansion across a corporate expansion of huge hotels, standardized products, standardized construction models, critical mass. And I think it was based in part on the idea that these big hotel brands, you can go all across the world and have a very sort of comfortable, recognized product. I think that defined hotels for a very long time and still is part of the landscape today. I think that then the boutique hotels, which is, I guess, a buzzword probably was heard a decade ago or something, sort of challenged this and became sort of redefined that sort of, I don't want to say too critically, but relatively homogenized perspective towards hotels. And I think that started originally with the Traeger, at least from our perspective, sort of disrupting what a hotel could be, brought a nightclub into it. That sort of spawned other kind of, very, very, very F&B focused experiential hotels that were boutique, and there's a lot of design in them, very new design. ACE, which is Tungsten, has been known as the longest standing partner in ACE Hotel, very important in their business development over the past decade. ACE was kind of a response to that and focused on sort of more content-driven design, art, gastronomic, sort of very individualized restaurants. And I think that sort of took it to another level of distinction. And so it's authentic, it's sincere. And as it relates to technology, I think that the transmission systems of marketing to the consumer have changed dramatically. I think that's the biggest disruption. We talk about Airbnb being a big disruption, but I actually think that Airbnb is just a harbinger of the way people are changing their thought. And that is that this millennial mindset, and I'm not so involved, or I don't really care so much about the millennials as consumers as much as them as a sort of, again, a harbinger of a changed way of looking at things. And the new way of looking at things is focused more on content, on experience, and then the new information systems of Instagram and social media and online transmits that information more. And then I think, and this is where the controversial part comes in, potentially threatens the hegemony of identifying a hotel by a brand. And so that is why I think these hotels you mentioned, you say a buzz comes out, that hotel's super small. And so I think it's become a fragmented market where there's many more individual hotels that can perform in an outsized way by leveraging technology and running their content through those channels.
If you look at the business model now, and again, at building brand equity, and you mentioned those big changes which were created post-war and have a huge network effect that currently clearly enables them to have strong brand equity, marketing costs that we all know. What about the cost of creating those brands and this brand awareness? And I'm going to turn on Maria, because obviously, you run and operate classic brands, Meliá, hotel, resorts, and new brands that you've mentioned inside. In order to create this brand intangible, the brand effect, the brand awareness, as a comparison, is that much more expensive to create those brand equities around the inside? How much more do you spend on building those brand equity versus your established brands such as Meliá?
Well, in relation to the branding, we certainly, when we started with the Inside brand, it was almost 8 years ago or 10 years ago, we bought that brand. We bought it from a German investor that saw that niche of potential of this kind of cool lifestyle type of products, but it was quite different. It was very much focused on another generation. There was a businessman between 40s up that wanted something different. From there, we purchased it, we integrated within our brands. And what we did with that brand, together with the rest of the brands, in the latest 5 years, we did a full analysis of the brand architecture with a group called Havas that helped us to understand where we were positioned, what was necessary to be positioned where we thought we wanted to be, how we were perceived by the market, and which were these attributes which we thought maybe that were important, which for the people was hygienic factors, so they didn't even realize that they were important, and which were those hidden gems that we wanted to leverage. So with that approach with all our brands, and with that we did a strategy of valuation of the brands, the intangible. How much is the value of the brands that we had within the group, and how much we want them to be. So that was quite of a challenge process for us, because we come from an owning hat. We are a company that started owning all our hotels 60 years ago. So we are quite used about real asset valuations, how much the walls are valued for. And we were not aware how much the brands value. So we did all that process. That process was linked with a huge culture transformation of the group, not just linked to the brands, but the people providing the brand service and everything. And with that, we have done a strategy to position ourselves to the millennial set and the other type of demographic and psychographic type of people. So, and that has been a little bit of a process. Obviously, it's an investment. It has an economic investment, but we believe that it's not something that you have to think about. It's something that you have to do. Because nowadays, if you don't know your client, if you don't transform yourself to a digital world, just getting the big data in order to know your client and to provide the services in an agile way, at the end, hospitality will become a commodity. And people will think about us on the last stage, not the first stage. So We believe that everything we have been doing is what is needed, and we have created a link between the brands itself. Because, for example, we have the Inside brand that is very much millennial-oriented, but afterwards we have the Me brand, which is the luxury lifestyle type of brands that will be when millennials become a little bit older and they have the capability to pay higher amounts. We have to have brands adapted to that bring them the desires and the differentiation and the experience. They are now looking on the other brands that they are more affordable for them.
If I may, Maria, and the question might apply for everyone on the panel. You know, are you, from a P&L standpoint, closer to the usual standards that we all know, which is 3 to 4% marketing cost? Are you really for those brands that may apply to Rove, that may apply, to standard, maybe not now, maybe before? Are you more expensive than that to create this brand equity and to create this traction on the marketing standpoint?
I would say that it's not more expensive, it's how you focus the marketing. What we are spending the most now is marketing online. Before we spend most on the normal offline type of approach, and now we have implemented within the group a return on investment analysis of every marketing online approach we do to our clienteles. Obviously that has a cost, but the return on investment is well tracked, because before sometimes it was not that easy to track how the reaction of something that you were doing had in the market, and at the same time it allows you to reach higher amount of people. Because with social media, with all the tools that we have now, the volume of people that you can track on the right way, because you can even track the profile of the people you want to reach, is enormous. So it's just not an amount, I would say how you focus it. Has
Olivier.
changed a lot.
Yeah,
She said everything, but more
I would like to
expensive,
respond to
same
that.
story?
Well, in my view, it's definitely not more expensive to build a brand than it was in the past, but it's very, very different. And it's more challenging because, you have this classical breakdown of the media that you pay, right? The advertising. Then the media that you own, whatever you publish on your own website, the press releases. And then there's this earned media that you have little control over, but which has become so powerful since the emergence of the internet. And yet today, powerful brands are those that are credible, are those that are authentic. And I believe that the millennials and the millennial mindset tends to believe this more than the classical advertising. So it's about having a position, having a story about the brand, and then living it. And then if you do that, then the online reviews, the social media posts that we cannot control because guests who stay in our hotels then report to their friends, but which are much more powerful than in the past, because in the past they could call their friends and tell their acquaintances about the experience. Now they tell the world through the social media. This is a real support for our brand building, but it only works if our whole story is authentic and credible. And this is actually the fascinating thing about brand building today.
And on distribution, maybe Michael and Amar, you would like to comment on that, both for ACE and for the standard. Distribution, when you look at all those new names that appear, that makes the buzz, you will go on all the platforms that you all know, as well as I do, and you will find them. So I'm wondering, how much do you rely on returning guests, direct business, and how much do you rely on indirect? And is that a threat, or is that a positive element of your business model and equation?
I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to sort of go back to that last question. And since we're at a hotel conference and it's good to share ideas, I'll sort of throw out a trick of the trade that we sort of deploy to, I think, very significant effect. You mentioned CapEx and expense, and you think about FF&E costs and building out sort of the lobbies, but we found something which kind of, either we're prescient about it or not, but it relates to partnerships and collaboration and how you can sort of break up the distribution of expenses through partnerships. So I think ACE is known very much for this. In New York, one of the bigger properties has a number of different partnerships. There's Opening Ceremony, which is an amazing fashion brand. There's Project Number 8, which is a very interesting kind of arty store. Stumptown Coffee. There's the restaurant from the Spotted Pig. They're all brought into the mix. Not all hotels will have that huge platform, but the idea of partnering with influential brands, with influential producers within their category, and not running it through a vertically integrated stack of the brand, as I think is a very sort of interesting concept. And we found it to allow the brand to sort of step back and take more of a curatorial role, and then direct to your question, the CapEx, not just through the brand, but into supporting those other kind of satellite brands around the hotel. And the hotel becomes almost like an incubatory platform. And the way I think it ties in nicely to global expansion is that so many of these things can be celebrated locally. There's some interesting chef or interesting store, and those things can be brought in to collaborate with the hotel. And the reason why it ties into technology is that it's sort of Venn diagrams. The hotel is this circle, and then these companies have their circles. And then the hotel sort of starts to link into their spheres of influence. And then the hotel is transmitted, then the individualized hotel is transmitted locally and also globally through these new systems. I just think it relates to CapEx because it's actually a highly efficient system, but also I think very powerful and very, very much a part of what's happening now in hospitality. Sorry to take you off track from that question.
No, but that's fine. Amar, CapEx maybe?
I think
Same reaction on CapEx and on distribution models.
Let me talk about distribution. No, I think we haven't talked on that yet, but I think it's important. I think having done this for a long time, I think the hotel companies, hotel CEOs think very narrowly about their business. And we saw over the last 10 years, without real knowledge of the hotel companies, the online travel agencies took a whole bunch of their business. And before you knew it, you were paying 20 or 30% commissions to the likes of Expedia and Priceline, which created businesses bigger than any hotel companies put together because of the economic model. And when you talked about the big versus small and our brand's dead, there are some amazing hoteliers doing wonderful things on an individual basis that are incredibly creative. And then there are big companies that are trying to be creative and have incredible scale and that compete on that basis. But in between is a very interesting place because the most creative companies don't have the scale, and the companies with the most scale, with all respect, don't have the creativity. So I think there's a place for brands like Standard and for Ace who retain that creativity, but can link it together and have enough scale to do things in distribution and get much more powerful. I'll give you an example for what we did. We looked at how emerging technology is changing the way hotel distribution happens, and we all know how fast mobile bookings are happening. We looked at solving a problem. We created an app called One Night Standard, and we solved an age-old hotel problem, which was excess inventory. So we created an app. After 3 p.m., you could get our hotels in our system at a discount. And what we found is that after 3 p.m., it was like ding, ding, ding. It was filling up our hotels. It was 65% local business, $55, $60 spent on average in the venues, which said we were tapping into the millennial mindset using technology and their propensity to travel wrapped in the guise of our brand. And that's how I think we have to break through these rigid walls that hotel companies have had in order to capture the way people are living today.
Before giving the floor to the audience for question, one last question, maybe for you, Michael, as Tungsten's partner, as an investor. It looks like everything we are talking about is basically talking about limited edition. It's about a couple of hotels, small brands, I'm not saying no brands, but small brands. As an investor, should I invest, should we invest in limited edition, which by essence has probably limited ability to grow and to scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to announce as of just about 2 days ago, we've actually divested from Ace Hotel, and we will be starting a new venture which relates to actually a concept of we're calling meta branding, which relates to your question in that we're looking to become hotel producers with linking in, Tungsten owns about 30 different brands and companies, and linking in that culture to create hotels that are technically unbranded. So we would be moving into a new category of hotel producer to sort of take these elements and put them into a hotel and make them about the property. Some of the more famous hotels that I love, the Carlisle, the Chateau Marmont, the Raleigh, they were developed in closer to the turn of the century, 1920s or something, to sort of be their own properties. And so that's, talk about individualized properties and development, we're focusing on taking it back to sort of actually the building itself and the culture locally. I don't know if that's sort of, I think it's a disruptive concept. We have about 3 hotels to announce soon, and And I think we'll see how that sort of rolls out. It's not going to be taking over the industry, but it is going to be focusing on a new way of thinking. So.
Thank you. Question for the audience. We've got 2 minutes 20 before we're kicked out of this stage. So feel free to shoot any question if you have. Yes, sir. I don't manage the mic. Sorry for that.
Hello. In a few years' time, we'll be having the Z generation, millennials, and the older generation, and all of them require different types of services for each segment. My question is today, when you design a hotel today, what are the changes that you are making in the architectural design of the hotels which you make today?
Who wants to take this one?
I can personally do it. Well, we have been in the market over 60 years. That means that we have hotels for all the generations at the present moment. So what we have been doing is, first of all, the design of the hotels, when you are in a group, on a bigger scale group, you cannot be as dramatic on architecture and design as you maybe can be on a niche, one standalone hotel. So you have to be special on the service with a very nice and different approach on the product, but not like the full dramatic that is going to be old-fashioned in 1 or 2 years. That's the first thing of what we're thinking about doing this. And in addition to that, what we have been doing is in the last years, transforming the brands through the brand architecture I was mentioning before into the new concepts with little by little a CapEx implementation. That should not be on a dramatic way, saying, listen, we're going to change everything dramatically, but you have to have a path and a strategy. Hotels that are 60 years old obviously need biggest investment and biggest change. Hotels that have 5 years old, maybe nothing. So that's a little bit the combination.
Maybe from an Emaar perspective, we change a lot the way we build hotels, both from address all the way to rove. So rove hotels are more standardized when it comes to construction than address hotels, but even there's elements, a lot of local art elements, for example, which really appeal to, we believe, the millennial mindset, because it draws a link from the hotel to its very locality. But also things like environmental friendliness, sustainability, which is also increasingly important. We also introduce a lot of technology into our hotels to make a hotel stay more seamless, more frictionless. However, and that's something I remind my team all the time, technology by itself is really cold, right? It wows once, it facilitates a hotel stay, but the human element remains, and we continue to invest in the human element. And our ambition is to be the best at marrying the power of technology with the warmth of human service, because to me that's the formula for the future, for millennials, but also for the other generation of travelers.
Which is great news for the education providers as we are.
I see some blinking lights.
Do we have time for one last question? One last question on the back, sir.
Roger Allen from Resources for Leisure Assets. Do you think we're not becoming too obsessive about the specific generations and losing sight of the tribal impact that, you may not be a millennial, but you are actively interested in what millennials are doing, following and participating in those activities?
I mean, I think that I was pleased to hear everyone sort of unified in their perspective. I think that what Meliá said, which was something I was going to say, she kind of took it ahead of me, but the idea of a psychographic versus demographic. So it's really not about, I don't even like the term demographic sometimes. I mean, it isolates it too much. And I think, as I said before, the idea of millennials and Airbnb, I think it's a harbinger of a new way of thinking, but we hope that the hotels speak super broadly to all types of age and categories all across the city and brings people in. So I don't think it's so specific. I actually tend to agree with you.
I agree. I think we in marketing speak, get too fixated on which generation is which. I think if you go back to the basics, what we do on this stage really well is create experiences, focus on experience creation. Whether you're 60 years old and like it because you have that mindset, or whether you're 20 years old and like it, it doesn't matter. So if we do that really well, bring people together really well, that's how we battle against this. And I think that's the magic that hotels can create that no one else can.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the panelists, Meliá, Olivier, Michael, Amar.
Thank you so
And
much
we'll
for
take it
the
from there.
great
We'll leave it
panel.
to you.
But I always
you.
get the last question. And the one question I have for you is, so in the region, we have all these great big boxes, big brands and everything. Olivier, you've taken a lead with the Rove concept. But what about all these other great concepts in the marketplace that have yet to come into the market? Why haven't they joined us yet here in the region, in Dubai, et cetera? I mean, you've got, you know, the Standard, the Ace, the Hoxtons, the Citizenms, the Zokus of the world. Not here. Why not?
I think one reason is the brands that you're talking about coming from US and Europe want to be in what they perceive as the culturally relevant centers. I want to be in Berlin, I want to be in Milan, I want to be in New York and Miami, et cetera. And I don't think those brands have understood the power of what's happening here and the shift that's happening in the world in this direction. So I think it's early for them, but I also think they don't have the most commercial mindset or the most forward thinking about what's happening geopolitically in the world. And I think we'll start to see that more and more. And from a Standard perspective, we're looking actively here because we see what's happening. We think the future of the world is in this generation.
So you're looking at the moment?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I mean, first off, I'm super happy to even be in the region. I'm very intrigued by the region. It really has, it speaks in a very outsized way globally. What we do at Tungsten is we sort of put together a collection of different things and these collaborations. And I could say that it used to be that everyone wanted to be in New York or maybe LA or Austin, but these kind of small, interesting brands that we collaborate with, I think are really wanting to now take it to the next level as New York becomes very expensive and kind of oversaturated. And I can tell you that I have indications from many companies we work with and would collaborate with on a hospitality project that they would love to come over here and check it out. And I would think they would share the same excitement that I have with what's here.
Okay, great. And Olivier, you've just announced just now, I think, 2 new Rove brands.
And here in Ras Al Khaimah.
In Ras Al Khaimah here.
Yes.
So.
But to come back to your question very quickly, I think it's changing. One thing about the UAE and Dubai especially was the huge focus on luxury hotels, and many of these concepts are not luxury brands, but this is changing. I mean, 25 Hours is coming to Dubai, Mama Shelter is coming. So there are new brands coming into the region, and it's great because it widens the offering.
And me, of course.
Yeah,
That's
I
opening.
Yeah, just in complementing with what he's saying, it's true that it was a market condition as well. The market was very much focused on the luxury. Now, I think that the perception is that there is a space for these other brands because there is a need, there is a demand, and it's not cover. And obviously, for us, it's a goal to be here, not just with me, which is more on the luxury segment, but with the Inside brand or even with the Soul brand, which is our lifestyle, a holiday vacation type of brand in locations like here. So I think it's a matter of time.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Benoît-Etienne, thank you for a fascinating panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.